we go out in nature, and no wonder we feel better. God created that nature for us to enjoy. So a lot of our kids now, right, used to be like, you know, go inside your room, and that was your punishment. Yeah. And now it's like, go outside and play. And they're like, I don't want to, you know. So go ahead and tell them, go outside and play.
Well, thank you for joining us for this Radiant Family Moment. Carmel and I are so thrilled to have you join us. And on behalf of Pastor Todd and Kelly, thank you for allowing us to partner with you as you grow passionate followers of Jesus that will impact our world. We have been going through a series with Arlene Pellicane, national speaker and author, and it has been so good to talk about screen time and how it affects our kids and skills that our families can learn to help our kids become stronger. And today we're dealing with the last one, and that one is attention. Focus. Arlene, talk to us about that.
Focus.
Yeah. And this isn't just for kids, this is for us adults too.
It's for everybody, right? Because we're so used to things like changing, so it's harder for us to pay attention. Yeah. Things have to be exciting in order to be engaging. Yeah. And so we start the chapter with a study that was done comparing American children to Mayan children. Yeah. So they took these kids from California and then kids from Guatemala, and they put them through this experiment where they would take two children, and one child had a toy that they were supposed to assemble, being taught to assemble, and the other child was just sitting still and was told, in a moment, you know, we'll give you something to do too. So they were doing this test to see how long could these children do these tasks, and how long could the waiting child just sit there and wait until it was their turn, you know, to do something. Yeah. So for the Mayan children, 2/3 of the time, no problem. They just sat there. They could sit for a super long time. Right. And the other person who's not assembling the toy can just sit there and just wait and watch. But when they put the American kids in, you can imagine the kid that didn't get something, right? The other kid got a toy to assemble, but the other kid's just sitting at the desk with nothing to do. And those kids, American kids, right? They tuned out, they swiggled, they got up, they ran around. And so those kids could not pay attention at all. And it was really a stark contrast between the Mayan kids, who were used to doing things with their families. They were used to working on the farm. They're used to doing slower paced activities and following directions. Whereas the American kids, what are we used to? We're used to being amused and given something. You know, you don't hand somebody else something and me nothing. You gotta hand me something too. So those kids really had a much harder time paying attention.
One of the things that I thought was great in that description was that those Mayan kids were autonomous. They didn't have helicopter parents.
Yes.
They were given some room to breathe, which meant that they then chose to pay attention, as opposed to being told, now you look at me right now and pay attention, like we often do as parents. It was a little bit different. They made the choice.
It was their choice, their responsibility, and then they did it for themselves.
Yeah.
It was amazing because you talked about how they were taught at an early age to do chores, to be a part of the family, and they had responsibility even at a young age. And I think for us, we don't expect much from our kids. We think, oh, they're just little, but they can't. I went on a missions trip many years ago to Thailand, and they had over 1,000 children come assembled in, and we were all up on stage waiting for them. And they came in row by row quietly. I mean, it wasn't like somebody was with the whip behind them. They came in quietly, and they sat so tightly all together, and the whole place was packed out, and they just sat there. And we were all amazed at, how is this possible? Like, you know, did they give them something to make them be like that? But it's what we have done to our own children with screens that's caused our kids to react and to move, and you know, maybe even ADHD that we've talked about as well.
Can you imagine a principal having 1,000 kids quietly line up, and they'd be like, what are you doing at this school? And just realizing, my goodness, if we would decrease the screen time and just have kids do normal activities and not be so amped up all the time, that they could follow simpler directions and do them.
I like what was said in the book about screens changing, that it doesn't mirror real life, and it can cause this lack of attention because a screen changes in just a few seconds. You know, I know when we talk about kids ministry, we try to encourage our leaders to keep their kids' attention and recognize that screens change at a minimum of 3 seconds at a time. And it's really affecting our kids and their ability to focus.
Yeah, they're really seeing the ADHD go up, you know, whether it's statistics that are showing us, wow, 4 out of 10 kids might be struggling with this, and this is a new phenomenon. This is not something we had 50 years ago. They did a study at Iowa State University about television and video game exposure with kids and attention problems. So they took more than 1,000 middle-aged children, and they observed them over 13 months. And they found that 6 to 12-year-olds who spent more than 2 days playing video games or watching TV had trouble paying attention in school and were 1.6 to 2.1 times more likely to have attention problems. And then the longer that happened, for every additional hour that happened, then that statistic would keep driving up, that it would be more likely. And Dr. Dimitri Christakis, he's a co-author of the study, associate professor of pediatrics at the University of Washington. He says this: the concern is that the pacing of the program, whether it's video games or TV, is overstimulating and contributes to attention problems. So think about Mr. Rogers, right?
Man.
He's talking very slowly, one camera, button the sweater. He talks. I mean, it's really slow paced.
Yeah.
So if your kids are going to watch something, I say watch Mr. Rogers, because you're going to get a good lesson. And it's very much like real life of someone just talking to you. But TV today is not like that.
Right.
It's changing. It blows up. It changes colors. New scene, new person, new angle. That's happening. So when kids are used to that and their attention is wired in that way, when they get to school and they just have to listen to a person, a teacher talking to them, they're like, I'm out. This is really boring. I don't like this at all. So Dr. Catherine Steiner Adair, she is a counselor that really works with technology and children, and she says this: I've worked with children with ADD and ADHD for many, proper medication makes all the difference in their ability to live up to their potential and thrive. But given the dramatic rise in the diagnosis in recent years and growing concerns about the over-medication of children, we need to be more discerning. Given what we already know from research about the negative effects of media and screenplay on children's self-regulation, attention, aggressive behavior, sleep, play patterns, we cannot ignore the possible link. And so there's just this idea that you just have to consider it. If your child is having trouble in school, if they're coming and their teacher's saying they're having trouble paying attention, or even on a Zoom call, can you imagine? How is the poor child gonna pay attention looking at the screen of the teacher? It's really difficult. And so if your children are having trouble, you have to think about their recreation time. Are they on screens a lot? Are they playing games that are constantly changing? Are they swiping on social media that's constantly changing? Even social media, everything has to get driven up a notch. Now it's gotta be video. And now our words have to do this. I mean, it's just always stylized in a way to get your attention, because we're all trying to capture attention. And with so much marketing, so many billions of dollars being targeted at your child's phone to capture attention, that's all it is. It's an attention economy, and they're trying to get your attention and your child's attention. So if that's the world your child lives in, then no wonder when they go to a job interview, they come to church and listen to a message, even an engaging kids ministry type of environment, they're like, I'm used to something a little bit more exciting, So we have to really question, how is my child, can they pay attention? Can they sit and pay attention?
Which leads to that idea that you address here, the wandering mind. Talk to us about that.
And Matt Killingsworth over at Harvard, he did this study of what people are thinking about, asking them questions like, what are you thinking about, et cetera. And he found that 46% of us, when we're in a moment, we're thinking about something else. So we're thinking about a future event, or we're thinking about something that just happened, or we're thinking about our social media feed, we're thinking about our email, we're thinking about what would we have done in that video game different. So while we're sitting here, you're sitting here with me and we're talking about screen time, you might be thinking about, what am I going to cook for dinner? I better pull up that recipe. Or, man, I really got to, my son's been having problems with this. I better, our minds are not present. And they're being trained that way because we're so used to getting pulled by technology of, look at this, sale, last day, 24 hours, last chance, amazing headline. If you don't learn this, your kids will be messed up. Like we're being pulled
That's so
all the
true.
time. And so we are thinking about other things instead of being present in the moment. And so how interesting if we as adults have that problem for a child, right? That they have to be able to have the self-control to say, I'm in math now,
Right.
and I should be thinking about math.
Yeah.
You know, that takes discipline, practice. So if your child is on technology too much, that's a really big hurdle to overcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are all really good things, because even just the other day, I had the mission to get my phone and look at an email.
Yes.
But I got distracted and it went to another email. There was a coupon or whatever, and it just linked from this, and then you link to something else.
Yes.
And then after I was like, what am I on here for? Like, what was the purpose? And then you realize after, oh my goodness, it was for that one specific thing.
Yeah.
And I wandered way far off.
Yeah.
And so for us to feel like we have more self-control, you're right. How hard is it for kids to deal with their emotions and their thought patterns, and how difficult that is?
Yes.
So, wow.
And you talk in here about multitasking, because I think that's where we want to excuse maybe and say, well, I'm multitasking. I'm doing more than one thing at a time. You address that in the book.
Yeah, and so a lot of the experts have said this whole multitasking thing we do because we were saving time, that it actually doesn't save time, because let's say I'm writing a book. This is a perfect example, right? I don't want to write the book. I want to do something else. So I start writing a chapter. You start doing your legitimate work, right? And they think, oh, on the side, let me see my email. Oh, and on this side, you know, we've got practice later today. Let me make sure that I've got it all lined up. And all of a sudden, you've stopped working, right? And you think you're multitasking because you're doing all these things at once. And they say it takes about 20 minutes to kind of get back to where you started. So you're in that flow where you are in the zone and you're doing what you're supposed to do, and you're being creative, but then you get sidetracked by all these things and multitasking, and then it ends up just taking you longer. So really you're switching your attention from one thing to the other, and nothing is getting your good focus. And so even with your kids, it's interesting because it is a different generation. So they're thinking, oh, I'll do my homework and I'll have music open and I'll be chatting with my friend and I'll scroll on social media at the same time. And while they are more adept at having a lot of things happening at once because they're more used to it, like let's say grandma would be like, what's happening here? And they kind of have a feel. Still, if they were able to focus like on one thing and just do that thing, like even say, hey, you want to catch up with your friends? You have 10 minutes of focused time to check in with your friends on social media, and then your social media minutes are over, right? So let's say even you were just focused, like, I'm going to catch up with these friends, and I'm going to put it down, versus I'm going to have this open all day, I'm going to multitask. You know, you would be so much more effective if you just said, even as an adult, as a parent, like, okay, we're going to just check our email at certain times of the day versus all day long. And it's the same thing for kids, that when they're multitasking, it's not really helping them because homework that's supposed to take, let's say, 20 minutes, all of a sudden 3 hours later, they're like, yeah, we're still doing homework. Yeah, we've heard that before.
So kind of segue on that multitasking. I can almost hear the conversation, but no, I need to, because I focus on this and then I need to jump to that. What I hear you saying really is that's the excuse that helps solidify a bad habit more than actually being a productive thing.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way to say it, is that we look around and say, well, everyone else is living this way, so why should I live in a different way? And truly, I think it is a self-control issue, like an attention, being able to take your attention and concentrate, focus on one thing. And maybe your child can have music on in the background, and that's okay. But if it's music videos, then of course, what do? We watch. Like, we want to see, like, what does that look like? So just streaming music that does not have a video component, and they want to listen to music and they want to do their homework, I think that's something that's okay. But when they're really distracted, then, I mean, no matter how adept you are, you're not going to be as productive. And it is what we tell ourselves to make ourselves feel like it's okay.
So basically what you're saying too is that it starts with us as parents, and setting that example and setting that standard in our home of boundaries and limits. And and doing it in a healthy way.
And you know what? It used to be that things just had one thing it could do, like a record player. It just plays a record, right? And that was kind of good because everything had its place. But now, since the phone, the iPad, the device, your flat screen, it does everything. So you always feel like, oh, I could always have all these things happening all at once, but your brain really needs that calm, quiet,
That's good.
downtime. Like your brain literally, in order to absorb what it's learned, it just needs quiet. And then it kind of processes what happened in the day. It puts it in little memory banks and it lets you remember things and it files everything away for you. But if you're constantly going, there's no filing happening. And you wonder, like, why is this not getting in my kid's brain?
So
it's just
good.
they're always go. And they can't process and just pay attention to one thing. So really reading is a very simple cure to our attention disease, because think of it, if you read online, and this is even print reading versus electronic reading. So if your e-reader just is a book, like that's all it has, then that could be okay. But if it's like, oh, it's an e-reader, but if you press this, it hyperlinks to that. And if you press this, it hyperlinks to that. A lot of times what they find in studies is the kids are that's not really helping them that much because they're still going out to doing all these different things. Because when you read, even a paper book is best because there's nothing else to do. Nothing else to do. Like you have to read Charlotte's Web. Like there's nothing
A text isn't coming
else
in.
there. So really having your children, if you're having trouble with attention, a wonderful strengthening is, here is Charlotte's Web, and please read this book and tell me what you think of it.
That's
you
good.
know. And so reading is going to be really good. Print is always going to be best because there are no distractions. Because you can get kind of lost in it. You actually, through tests, they show you remember more from print. And then you also have a feel for like, oh, I'm halfway through the book.
That's true.
You know, oh, I remember, you know how you remember something, you know, oh, it was on the top left-hand corner, and you go back in the book and you look for it. When you do things on an e-reader or online, you don't have those kinds of references for memory. And then there's just so much distraction when you're online. So that's that. So print books, go to the library, it's free. And the younger you start, the better. They'll be used to books. But even with your teenagers, like if you're like, sorry, dude, half an hour, you and the book, nothing else is available. If there's no other option, I mean, it could be really wonderful that your teenager finds a whole new world through books that they really love, that they really love.
I like that. It's a great tool to get our kids' attention back, their focus. You also talk about other attention boosters like getting your kids to play or having them outside or sleeping.
Exactly. You know, there was a funny study. Like, think of it, if you just told your child, stand still for 5 minutes, right? It's kind of hard. But if you say, you're a pirate and you're guarding the gold and you have to stand here and guard the gold, they found that the kids can do that much longer because they're playing. So how interesting that play, when they're playing together without any screens, it helps them to pay attention to different things because they're playing store. And they have to listen for what the customer wants. And then they have to make the change. Like they have to pay attention and be in the moment. They can't be all like distracted, like, oh, I didn't hear your order, you know, or whatever. So playtime without screens really does help your children pay attention to what's happening in life around them. Getting outdoors, you know, it's so rejuvenating to be outdoors. That's why people love going camping and getting outside. And they'll take kids who are really addicted to technology, and these restart centers are in these beautiful wooded places, you know, where they can be outdoors. And it makes sense because God says that the heavens declare my glory, you know, and the trees praise him. And these are all of things that God created. So when we're depleted, we go out in nature, and no wonder we feel better. God created that nature for us to enjoy. So a lot of our kids now, right, used to be like, you know, go inside your room, and that was your punishment. And now it's like, go outside and play. And they're like, I don't want to, you know. So go ahead and tell them, go outside and play. And on a snow day, you just kind of peek out for 5 minutes and come out. But it's really healthy. Like it's healthy for your kids to be out in nature, and it really does. They've done studies where they had people take a test, And then they had one group during the break be in a very urban area, very city-like, a lot of concrete, and then they had the other set walk in the trees, like a nice park, and then come back. And the park people always score higher on the test than the urban, because we just really are rejuvenated by nature, and that's so healthy for kids.
So good.
It's so good. Well, this has all been really good. There's a line that you share, though, that I think just encapsulates so much of what we've been talking about, and it's this: a media poor life has led to a family rich life. Help us unpack that and just how we can maybe emulate that.
Yeah, so media poor, family rich.
Yeah.
And you can flip that if you're real media rich and you have family poor, because you're all on your devices. So it's that idea of, is technology bringing you together? Because that's what it promises to do, right? It's marketed to do. But in your real life, is technology doing that? Or is it pulling you further apart? And so you have to, there's a risk involved. So if you don't, if you delay phones, which I completely recommend. So remember, Bill Gates did not give his children phones until they were 14.
Right.
Steve Jobs, when he was just asked, hey, how do your kids like the iPad? He was like, my kids don't have one. It's like every person in America, I'm telling them to have one, but I don't have one. And this should tell us something, because they knew we can be very media rich, but we're going to be family poor.
Wow.
And so there's a risk there that you might feel like, oh, we're the weird parents, or, my kids, what's going to happen? But I can tell you with great confidence that you are not going to hear a parent say, oh, I really wish I would have given that smartphone in elementary school. Since my daughter's on Instagram, she is so much healthier and vibrant for God and loves her life. No one says this. They all say, I wish I would have waited.
That's true.
Ever since we got this, it's been this problem. I have a high schooler that I'm like, where are you getting these ideas? This is not our family values. What's happening? And so I'm coming to you not as a perfect parent. I'm sure there are things that my kids watch on YouTube that I'd be like, okay, we are watching the wrong things and we're watching too much of it. So I'm not saying I'm a perfect parent, but just by not having a smartphone and not by allowing social media or video games, so those are kind of our three big ones, that has really allowed us, so we're media poor, but I really feel like we're a very close family. Like we're family rich. So I just encourage you and invite you. It might be hard now, but later, and not even like years later, like a month later, you're gonna be like, wow, why didn't we do this before? That this media poor life can really lead to a much more family rich and God rich life.
Yeah.
So as we're talking about that, and we're just closing up, can you just touch on the difference between physically and emotionally present being there?
Yes. Yeah. So we can be physically present, right?
Yeah.
But emotionally, you're on, that eye contact. I think if you follow the eyes, I think that will answer actually a lot of that question. Because if you're present physically, but your eyes are somewhere else, then most likely you're not emotionally being present with that other person, whether it's a child or with a spouse. But if you're physically present and emotionally present with someone, your eyes are looking at them. You're talking with them. And we're not saying you have to like stare at your child 24 hours a day. I'm here for you. I'm here for you. We're not trying to be weird. But when you're having dinner, like, you're emotionally present. You're looking at them. At bedtime, you're emotionally present. You're looking at them. Maybe 5 minutes that you're like, hey, come sit on the couch with me. Let's read this book together out loud. And you're emotionally present with them. Those are those moments that really matter. So your eyes, follow your eyes, and it will kind of tell the story.
And that's what we want, isn't it? We want to be present. We want our kids to be present with us, which is why we rail against screen times when they have it, but we have to be honest and start with us. And so it starts with us. And we're just so thankful that you've joined us for this time as we've had a radiant family moment and really unpacked, Arlene, this book. What happens when it comes to screens has been so, so good. And this isn't the last segment. We're going to take one more segment. We're going to go through some frequently asked questions and go into that a little bit. But thank you so much for joining us during this time. We appreciate it. And Arlene, we really appreciate you.
Great to be here.
Thanks so much for being with us again for our Radiant Family Moment. We look forward to seeing you again next time. And we've got some amazing resources, so don't forget to check them out.